A long-awaited report from the UN says China's widespread detention of Uyghur and other mostly Muslim ethnic minorities may constitute crimes against humanity. The report calls for an urgent international response over allegations of torture and other rights violations. Now, we have coverage for you from Abby Kugadassan in London with details on what the UN is saying, and Patrick Falk, who's in Beijing, with some reaction from the Chinese government. But Abby, let's start with you. Tell us more about the report itself.
Hannah, the report says crimes against humanity may have been committed by China in its northwestern province of Xinjiang. Human rights groups believe more than 1 million Uyghurs, mostly Muslims, and other minorities are still being held against their will in China, and the UN is calling on Beijing to release any detainees. This nearly 50-page report outlines various abuses. The agency spoke to 26 former inmates, and 2/3 of them gave accounts that amount to torture. Some explained how they were strapped down and struck with electric batons. Others say they faced a form of waterboarding during intense interrogations. The UN says claims of sexual violence like rape in detention are also credible. The agency also outlined forced sterilization and abortions. This morning, I spoke with a representative at the World Uyghur Congress. Sumrathai Erkin says this UN report is vindication for her community.
We can also go to states that were maybe not as supportive as, the usual allies, but maybe the middle ground states who were hesitant on China. Now they have a tool on which they can use, on which they can rely to take action. So I think it's important because it will be a solid tool for advocacy and a credible one as well.
They've waited a long time for this report. It was commissioned about 3 years ago. It was meant to be released last year, but delay after delay did ignite concerns. The document would not see the light of day, but the report was made public just minutes before the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet's term, came to an end. Aside from the findings, the UN is making recommendations as well. It's asking countries not to deport Uyghurs back to China. The UN did not call this a genocide in this report like Canada and other countries have. But again, the agency acknowledging crimes against humanity may have been committed in China.
Abby Kugadassan reporting from London. Thank you kindly. And now let's go to Beijing with Patrick Falk and his reaction, the reaction that we're hearing from China and some new news on the ground there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the furious response that we heard from the Foreign Ministry gives you a little bit of an idea of the pressure that the Office for the High Commission of Human Rights came under not to publish this report. Spokesperson Wang Wenbin said the, quote, so-called assessment was illegal, null and void and violated the principles of objectivity. And he also said that it was aimed at smearing China. And so it has been taken very badly by China, as one might have imagined. And to a certain extent, it shows just how damaging Beijing sees this.
You talk about it being damaging. What do they see as the most damaging part of this report?
Well, you heard a little bit a moment ago about what was contained in the report specifically, and, the most serious allegation perhaps is that the treatment of ethnic Uyghurs possibly amounts to international crimes against humanity. And, the ethnic Uyghurs in particular, the 26 former inmates that were part of this report, 2/3 of whom were possibly subjected to what amounted to torture. I mean, we're talking about things like hunger and injection tactics in what China refers to as vocational and educational training centers. There was also evidence of forced sterilization that was written about in this report, and also it included data from the Chinese government itself using its own data on things like sterilization rates in the region. So that added to the credibility of it to a certain extent. But the very fact that Michelle Bachelet issued or decided to go ahead and publish this report in the final minutes of her term in office does speak volumes in a way that she wanted to conclude this episode in the way that it needed to be concluded, and that it was about issuing the report according to the findings of her office. And that adds credibility, in a sense, to what has been published. And that is part of the reason why Beijing finds this so damaging, because, these sorts of allegations have been heard in the past. But, this report carries the weight of the UN. And that's what is going to add pressure to China, to governments around the world and other bodies to act accordingly.
Okay, thank you for reporting, Patrick Falk in Beijing.